Hope your day or night's going well. Let's talk about Prodeus. If you're into the recent retro shooter trend, then you've definitely heard of this game before. But just in case you haven't, let me give you a quick description. Prodeus is a fast-paced FPS game that takes heavy inspiration from 90s classics like Doom and Quake. It's been in early access for years up until it officially launched about a year ago. It's got some of the hallmarks of a great retro FPS, but its main claim to fame is an in-game level creator. There's a lot to like about Prodeus, but unfortunately, there's also quite a lot that I don't like about it too. Let's start with the presentation. The presentation of Prodeus is excellent. It uses the Unity engine, which is fairly common for games like this. Most retro FPS games tend to go for an older 90s look with muted colors and huge pixelated textures, but Prodeus goes for a much more modern look. Environments are extremely detailed and all have this really well thought out feel to them. The level geometry is very clean looking, so it's super easy to tell where you can and cannot go. The lighting though is what really sells the whole thing. It's got this super smooth fill light effect to it, like something that you'd see in a really well shot movie. It immediately becomes the attention of whatever area you're in because of how much it affects the visuals. It looks especially good when you can see it shining through windows or when you're in an area with lava. There's also the occasional weather theme level involving either rain or snow, which are particularly atmospheric. The enemy and weapon models also look fantastic. These have more of a traditional pixelated look to them like you would see in most other retro shooters. I don't think they're actually sprites, but the look is very convincing if that's what the intention was. They have this kind of stop motion effect to them too, which I really like. And can we quickly talk about the amount of blood in this game? I cannot think of another game that even comes close to having this much blood in it. Every single enemy encounter in this game results in the floor, the walls, and even the ceiling being coated in red. It's actually kind of distracting sometimes, but it does look pretty awesome. Next, let's talk about the audio. The audio of Prodeus is also great. Weapons all have this super meaty level of quality to them. Take a listen. Same goes for pretty much everything else. Basic stuff like interacting with items and normal environment sound effects all sound great. Then there's the soundtrack. It's produced by Andrew Holsholt, so it should come as no surprise that it's an amazing soundtrack. One thing I really appreciate is that there's a good amount of ambient tracks in this game. A lot of retro FPS games have rock or metal music going constantly, even when you aren't in combat, which can get really annoying, but the music is toned way down when you're out of combat in this game. It's also just really well mixed audio. It never muffles or drowns out the sounds of your weapons or enemies, which may seem like a small thing, but it's really obvious when a game gets this wrong, so I just wanted to give it credit for that. Then there's the performance. On PC, this game runs great. Now granted, I do have a fairly high-end machine, but you shouldn't have any trouble running this game well unless you have something that's extremely outdated. It's also very scalable, with a good amount of settings to change. So yeah, Prodeus looks and sounds great. But none of that matters if it doesn't play well, so let's talk about the gameplay next. Unfortunately, this is where we get to the more divisive parts of this game. Some aspects of the gameplay in Prodeus are great, some are confusing, and some are just downright bad. Let's start with what I like though first. Prodeus has a lot, and I mean a lot of weapons. You know how most FPS games have a weapon wheel that lets you easily switch between weapons? Well, Prodeus has a weapon grid, because I guess this many weapons would look weird on a wheel. All of them feel great to use, with very satisfying feedback as you turn enemies into a puddle of red. Most of them also have an alternate fire, which is cool. Then there's the level design. It's excellent. There's a wide range of different levels in the main campaign, from your more basic corridor outpost theme levels to some absolutely insane ones the further you progress. Seriously, some of the stuff that happens in the later levels is crazy. It's unlike anything I've seen in a shooter before. There's this one level where the entire floor starts caving in, and it's super cool to watch. And that's just one example, because I don't want to spoil the other ones. The level design is just very well laid out, too. There's almost no unnecessary backtracking in this game, and there's quite a large amount of secrets to find. Unfortunately, though, this is where my praise ends for Prodeus in regards to its gameplay, so let's get into what I don't like. Let's get the most obvious thing out of the way first, the reloading. Yes, Prodeus has manual reloading for almost every single weapon. This in and of itself isn't inherently bad. There's hundreds of great FPS games with manual reloading in them. But if you ask me, manual reloading does not belong in a game like this. It brings the frantic combat to a screeching halt whenever you realize you're out of ammo for whatever gun you're using. And you might be thinking, just switch weapons, it's not that hard. And you're right, but what happens when I'm in a massive fight and I need to reload all of my weapons? I'll tell you what happens. You spend the next few seconds awkwardly running around trying to evade enemies as you frantically try to get enough bullets into your guns just to kill whatever is currently trying to kill you. And some of the enemies are pretty ruthless in this game, so you're pretty much guaranteed to take at least some damage every time you do this. I just don't understand why this is a thing in this game. There's a reason why manual reloading is in basically no other fast-paced FPS game like this. It might sound like I'm making this a bigger deal than it is, but you have to do this constantly in this game, because you only get a few kills out of a fully loaded weapon. But that's honestly a pretty minor complaint compared to this next issue I have, which is the way that Prodeus handles checkpoints. So in pretty much every other retro FPS game, when you die, you either restart the level or restart at a checkpoint. In Prodeus, you run into these blue orb things called nexus points, and that essentially acts as your checkpoint. So what's the problem, you might be asking? Well, when you die in this game, you do respawn at those blue orbs, but all of your progress is still kept. So any enemies that you killed prior to your death are still dead. This means that dying in this game means absolutely nothing. You could literally be the worst FPS player ever, and you would be able to beat this game on the hardest difficulty purely from brute forcing your way through, death after death. This design choice just baffles me. And remember how I mentioned that this game was in early access for like 2 years before it came out? This is one of the things that I was sure was going to be changed when it fully released. I just assumed that this system was only put in place to make level design easier or something. But no, this is an intentional design choice. I simply do not understand the reasoning behind this, and everyone that I've talked to about this game agrees that this mechanic sucks and should have been changed or removed. There's so many better ways that this could have been handled. Like, what if every time you died, you had to run back to your corpse in order to retrieve your weapons, and if you failed, then you fully restarted from that checkpoint? Or what if you had limited health when you respawned, and had to kill a certain number of enemies to restore it? Pretty much anything else would have been better than how it is now. This completely changes the way that you play this game, because any sense of danger is just removed, because you know that if you mess up and die, you can just run back to wherever you were and continue progressing. This feels like a feature that should be reserved for an easy mode for FPS newcomers or something. But yeah, I really hope the developers reconsider this at some point in the future. My next complaint has to do with the enemy design. Prodeus is really just a Doom clone in this department. Now don't get me wrong, there are some original enemy designs, and they look awesome. But the majority of the enemies in this game are just slightly different looking versions of enemies from classic Doom. The Bloater is the Cacodemon, the Fiend is the Imp, the Lunger is the Pinky, I could keep going. And then some of the enemies are just downright bad if you ask me. Later in the game, you come across these Chaos enemies, which are literally just blue versions of pre-existing enemies with more health and do more damage. Now taking inspiration from classic Doom's enemy roster is not a bad thing. Classic Doom's enemy roster is borderline perfect. There's a reason why basically every retro FPS game takes inspiration from it. The difference is that most other retro FPS games have a unique enemy design style that makes them stand out. Prodeus, on the other hand, just looks like if Brutal Doom was a standalone game sometimes. My final complaint has to do with the shop. Levels are filled with these things called ore, and you need to collect this ore in order to unlock things at the shop. Now that in and of itself is not what I dislike. My problem is that there are specific weapons and abilities that can only be obtained through the shop. The double jump and dash, for example, are locked behind this feature. These seem like basic abilities that you would unlock naturally, but instead, you have to collect these items to get them. Same goes for some of the cooler weapons in this game, like the auto shotgun. And these aren't cheap either. You will have to actively go out of your way to collect tons of ore in order to unlock everything in the shop. The reason I dislike this is because it comes off as trying to extend this game's runtime for basically no reason. If you want to unlock everything in this game, you will most likely have to spend hours replaying levels, looking for every secret ore. Or if you don't want to do that, you'll look up a guide on YouTube that shows where they all are, and that's no fun either. I think this system should have been either heavily changed or removed. Alright, I know it seems like I just ripped this game a new one and told you that it sucks, but that's not what I want you to take away from this video at all. I like this game, a lot in fact. I just want you to be aware of some things that you may or may not like when considering it. You might disagree with everything that I just said, and that's totally fine. For a lot of people, these things are non-issues. It all depends on your personal preference. Let's talk about that level maker next. The level maker is actually incredible, and it's the main reason that anyone should get this game. Some of the stuff that people have created using this tool are simply amazing, and even surpass the main campaign levels at times. There's a browser that you can use to sort by level types, like standard levels, remakes, horde modes, and a bunch of others. Now, as far as actually making levels goes, I tried it and had zero idea what I was doing, but that doesn't matter. You do not need to actually make any levels to get the most out of this game. You can just enjoy the hundreds of great levels the community has built up over the years. This is such a great feature for a game like this, because it greatly enhances the value and time that you will get out of it. With most retro shooters, I beat them once or twice and then move on from them. But with Prodeus, regardless of the issues that I have with it, I consistently come back to this game to check out the new levels people have made. If you're on the fence about this game, I really do think the level maker drastically outweighs all of the negatives that it has. Finally, Prodeus does also have a multiplayer mode, but I wasn't able to try it unfortunately. It's either abandoned or the servers aren't working at the time of making this video, so I can't speak on that aspect of this game. And that's Prodeus. Regardless of what I don't like about it, this is a good game. Its amazing visual style, combined with its incredible level editor, really do make this a game worth considering if you're into this genre. If you're able to look past the negatives, then I do not think that this is one that you'll be disappointed by. Thanks for watching, and have a good one.